Joining me today is the enigmatic Trix. He is actually the coach for Oxygen North America, and joining us today to give us his initial impressions on the patch dropping tomorrow. The notes just came out, specifically talking about the changes to our favorite Lieutenant Belica, and of course, Steel as well. So, Trix, getting right into it, man. The Belica changes as a whole. Belka already was being picked up quite frequently, especially by your team, with a good amount of success, and now this seems to be a overall buff to her kit. But we'll start at the Void Bomb range increase. That's just a straightforward buff, don't you think?
Yeah, it's just straightforward buff. It fixes one of the biggest problems she has on lane, and that she has to walk really far forward to get any meaningful wave clear or poke off, as opposed to something like Howitzer and Gadget, which is the reason you see her a lot in the off lane instead of mid lane. So with the range buff, she can farm safer in the off lane in that 2v1 scenario, but you also may see her more often in solo queue, played mid.
There you go. Now, this to me is the biggest one, the Seismic Assault buff for her. That was a fairly difficult stun to land against, unless it was followed up with or something like that. Most, I think, high-level players were able to predict it or move out of its way if it's very telegraphed. But now with it moving faster, it seems like that CC, which is already very, very strong, Belka just is going to fit right into the meta with this buff.
Yeah, the Seismic Assault, you see a lot comboed with something like Rampage Rock into Belka ult, or into Belka Seismic Assault, or you see like Steel ult into Seismic Assault. And the big strength of Seismic Assault is that it can hit groups of people, and it's a very long duration knockup, but like you said, it was really slow, it was really hard to avoid, or it was really hard to hit, easy to avoid, kind of clunky, but now that not only does it move faster, it activates faster, you'll see it used probably a lot more in 1v1 scenarios, and just as possibly like a pick move that you can use similar to a Rampage Rock.
Now this is the interesting one here. Well, the next two are the interesting ones, the Void Drone. So that being, it basically was a base amount before, and now they're changing it to percentage. That seems to just play more into her kit of design of being anti-mage. So essentially, correct me if I'm wrong here, this is just going to make it stronger against those who have high scaling mana pools and maybe weaker against like fighters and people with lower scale mana pools, but still, I think, very impactful nonetheless.
Yeah, by flat numbers, it's a nerf to fighters and carries and a buff to casters, but since it is a percentage-wise, it affects, I would say it actually affects those with lower mana pools harder, because by nature of like all spells costing roughly the same, like most spells cost an average of 100 mana.
Right.
So since fighters have that lower base mana pool anyways, they're going to run out of mana just as fast, but it is, I think, more in balance now than it was before, where you were just draining like a flat 40 mana per second. But like just by nature of percentages, it affects every character statistics-wise equally, but against casters, you will see a bigger mana drain faster, which lets you get those really hard-hitting ults off.
Speaking of which, we'll just go right into it, man. So the ult was changed up a little bit, and before we got into this, we were kind of discussing it, but we'll talk about what we do know for sure. And just basically, it now scales with power a little bit, the 0.15%, but they also reduce the base multiplier. So, I mean, I think you've crunched the numbers on this. Is this a buff? Is this a nerf? Or is jury still out on this?
So, there's been some kind of debate between the community, I think, where we got the final ult breakpoint is either 200 or 222 power for where that breaks even. So, for 200, that's 33, I think, points of power, and then for 222, it's like 37. So that just means that you won't see Belica's building some Belica's build where they just build like utility and then penetration and hit those hard hitting ultis but don't really have anything else. So you'll see Belica's have to build more damage or caster oriented, which is what Oxygen runs anyways. Ram Riddles stacks those adamant edges and then moves into a high infinity stream. So you'll probably end up seeing more of that build in solo queue, because now that it has a power scaling, if you just run that utility, you're missing out on 30% of the damage that you would have before.
And another question I think a lot of us thinking is this going to mean that it's going to be doing more damage or less damage overall? or does it depend on the mana? I mean, its overall usage in the current state of the game. Is it going to change, or are you still going to be using it at the exact same moments you otherwise would have used it, but it's just going to be doing more damage now?
It's definitely it's a pretty big hit early game for sure. Since you won't have that power to make up for the difference in scaling. So early game, the ult was already pretty weak.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really use it unless like you were 100% guaranteed to get the kill, because a lot of times you would use it and people would walk away with like 50 HP.
Right.
So early game, you're definitely gonna feel it, especially since you don't have that power and the scaling's been lowered. But late game, I think it's gonna be you're gonna see really big ults.
Well, that's it for Belica. Overall, we talked about the individual skills there. You mentioned it briefly at the top there, but this is, I think, pretty straightforward. A buff to her kit, maybe in some way a little bit of a nerf in her early game, but that sort of is made up by the fact that she can be a primary, a much more reliable means of primary initiation with a seismic assault buff. But overall, do you expect her flexibility to increase? Are we going to see her laned in different ways, or are we still going to see her in the same traditional way, just being better at what she already does?
I think you'll see her in the same traditional way. Like I said, I think her viability in mid lane may be improved because of this, like the farther range on the Void Bomb.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't expect her to see a lot of success in the mid lane just because like her lack of mobility and Seismic Assault, even though it is faster, it's still not as reliable of an escape as something like Howitzer Mine,
Right.
or Gadget's Beat Gate Slow. So you could see that. I think we'll probably try it out maybe on Oxygen if we aren't running dual mid, which is kind of what we're doing. But I would expect to see it in solo queue at least for the first few days.
All right, so that's it for Belica, guys. We'll move on to Steel here. Steel. And I think this is a one that everyone in the community can get behind this, man. Steel has been pretty much one of the best heroes in Monolith since, and even dating back to Legacy. He was really good on Legacy as well here. And how crowd control is so very strong. Steel has been a big catalyst as to why CC has been as strong as it is. So it's his ultimate that's been changed. Reduce the range from 900 to 900 from 1500, about a 30-ish% decrease. And of course the radius has been reduced a little bit, not massively significant, but I think it's the range more than anything else. So I think the question everyone is asking themselves right now after seeing this change, where in the spectrum of power do you think Steel's going to fall now?
So I personally think that the Steel nerf was a bit overkill, and I know it's going to be like a super unpopular opinion, but I do believe that he should have been nerfed. I think he was untouched for a really long time, and people were kind of fed up. So a lot of people are happy about this, but the ult range now is the range that Belica Void Bomb is.
Okay, yeah, right.
Getting changed from. So we're all, if you played Belka, you're familiar with how short that is. You
Yes.
have to be almost on top of people. So what that's going to lead to is a much shorter range of engagement for Steel, where you have to do something like bull rush in, or you have to blink in, or you have to get a really good flank. So in flanking scenarios, this isn't a change you would notice aside from the radius, which is noticeable, but I don't think it's super significant in the way that the range reduction is. But if you have to bull rush in, you're missing out on a key part of your lockdown, which is the ult into bull rush. So you have targets that are inactionable for upwards of 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And if you blink in, as anybody that's tried to do blink Steel ulti knows, it feels really clunky, it's really slow, it's really easy to avoid, because if you see the Steel blink, most people just turn around and blink away anyways. So
yeah,
you could give you the mind game there, maybe, but as far as competitive play, I don't think we'll see Steel nearly as often as we're used to seeing him, where he's picked or banned pretty much every game.
Now, going off the cuff here, I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question, but it just came to mind. With this nerf to Steel, obviously that means there's been indirect buffs to other heroes. Do you think this will allow for a more diverse draft pool in the competitive scene now, or is it pretty much just going to be the same thing minus Steel?
It honestly depends on how big of a nerf this actually is, because I don't know if you've noticed, but the radius reduction is like already in the game.
Yeah.
Like it got implemented over the weekend, so we can feel that part of it, and so we know, like, have a rough idea of how it's going to impact the game. But the range increase or the range decrease is really up in the air as to how it's going to impact the game, because if people figure out ways around it, people figure out play styles that work with it, then Steel is going to be that same level of threat. But if it's as bad as I think it is, and as some other people think it's going to be, we're probably just going to see the same bans prioritized. You may get to see some interesting support picks, because two of the really big bans right now are Rampage and Decker that aren't Steel. So most of the bans are, I would say the top 4 bans for competitive play are Howitzer, Steel, Decker, and Rampage. So taking Steel out of that, that leaves only 3 strong picks, which creates a drafting issue for teams, where if your first pick, so you would ban, the other team would ban, and then you would pick up a strong character, right? That's your goal. But if you're the second team, so let's see, team 1 bans a strong pick, then you can sometimes throw away a ban, and then the other team picks up 1 strong character, and then you pick up 2 strong characters because there's 4 strong characters.
Right.
But now you don't. Even if you throw away a ban, you're only coming out even. So I think it does set up some weird drafting phases where if your first pick, you might throw away a ban, the other team might throw away a ban, depending on like how you guys want to play that. So I think for teams, it creates a much more mind gaming type scenario. Whether or not that translates to an audience where you guys can kind of pick up on the intricacies of like, oh, they banned this character, which is kind of a throwaway ban, but not really.
Yeah.
So we'll see in 2 weeks. There's another balance patch between
which
now and the next competitive tournament.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Which
play out.
Yeah, we'll definitely be going over that one. Trix, thank you, my man. Appreciate you coming in here and dropping those knowledge bombs. Everyone watching, of course, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all those other wonderful social media things. Before we go, Trix, any shout-outs?
Shout out to Team Oxygen and my boy Sneaky Industries on Twitch.
There you go, guys. I'm Shane. That's Trix. That was the initial impressions of the balance patch dropping tomorrow. Overall, Belka seems like she's going to be pretty good. And Steel, well, we've been asking for it a long time, and it's finally here. He's been nerfed. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you in Agora.